In this video, we're going to set up some open source best practices for our parallax scrolling npm library. So we'll set up ESLint and Prettier, all done with Git hooks, to make sure that even if we have lots and lots of open source contributors from all over the world, our code will always be formatted and styled in a consistent manner. ESLint is a great tool that allows us to specify certain rules for code style, and then it will tell us if we're breaking any of those rules. And we can even have it fix the mistakes for us. And then Prettier is another similar tool that focuses specifically on the formatting of the code, not necessarily stylistic choices like semicolons or trailing commas, but more like how to actually format the code, where to put line breaks and how to space out all the code. And together, ESLint and Prettier allow us to have super consistent code style and formatting throughout our whole repository. So we're going to need to install the dependencies for ESLint and Prettier. So we'll start off with ESLint, and I'll paste in the install line here. So we're adding ESLint, obviously, and then eslint-config-airbnb. And yes, that is the Airbnb that you're thinking of. And they've created a base configuration that they use that's pretty much become the de facto standard for code style in the JavaScript community. So it's a good place to start from. I don't use all of their rules, but it's a great place to start from. And then you can modify any rules that you don't like or you'd rather have different. And then we've also got an ESLint config Prettier. So that's just a configuration that works nicely with Prettier. And specifically, it won't shout at us for mistakes that Prettier is going to fix for us anyway. So there may be things that ESLint thinks we've done wrong, and maybe we have done them wrong, but Prettier is going to fix those for us when Prettier runs. So ESLint won't even tell us it's a mistake, because we don't need to worry about it because Prettier's taking care of that. And then the last one is an ESLint plugin Jest. And that's a plugin that will work nicely with Jest, which we used in the previous part to test our code. And it has awareness of the Jest global methods and functions like expect and describe, and it won't shout at us for using these undeclared methods and functions. So we'll run this, and it will just go through and install all of those packages. And now that they're all installed, we're going to need to tell ESLint how to use them by creating an ESLint RC file. So we'll just create ESLint RC, and I'll paste in all of the configuration that we've got here. So we start up here with the extends key, and we extend Airbnb-base and Prettier. So that's giving us the foundation of rule set to start from, and then we're just giving it some other options. So the parser options, ECMAScript version 2018, EMV. So we're just telling it that we'll be running potentially in environments, browser, node, ES6, and then we're also running Jest. So that's coming from the Jest plugin that we've just installed. And then I've just added a couple of extra rules here at the bottom. Most importantly, I've added this no underscore dangle rule, which will turn that rule off. It's on by default, and that will shout at us for using an underscore at the start of properties within our class. And if you remember to the code that we wrote for the library, we had an underscore absolute mount point. So it would shout at us for having that underscore there, but we want that there to indicate that it is a private property of that class and it shouldn't be used publicly. So I've added that rule in there. So now I'll close out of Vim and we'll add in the install line for Prettier. Paste that there and we'll just run that. So this is a simple one, just installing Prettier. And just like we did for ESLint, we're going to need to create a config file for Prettier. So we'll do Prettier RC. And from here, I'll paste in the configuration for Prettier. So this is pretty standard. You can look up what any of these properties mean in the Prettier documentation. I'm not going to cover them here. And then I'll also add another file and I'll call it Prettier ignore. So this is just like a git ignore, and it's just telling Prettier to ignore certain files or directories. So I'll paste that in there. So we don't want it to look at the node modules, a coverage directory if we generate one of those through testing, the build directory, or the dist directory. So now we have ESLint and Prettier into our project. One thing you may be thinking here is it's all well and good that we've installed Prettier and we've installed ESLint, and if people run those, we will have consistent code style and code formatting. But how do we enforce people who are contributing to the library to actually run these tools, to run ESLint and to run Prettier to format the code correctly? Well, the answer to that is we're going to use Git hooks, and specifically a hook called the pre-commit hook. So Git hooks are a great tool that honestly doesn't get covered that much, and I've not heard many people speak about it, but it's a great tool that allows you to run certain scripts and certain code at points during the Git lifecycle. And the one that we're going to use, as I mentioned, is pre-commit. So we can specify a script to run before any code gets committed to the Git repository. Setting up Git hooks manually is quite tricky and cumbersome, and they're difficult to distribute amongst the team because you can't check them into source control. So we're going to use an npm package called Husky that allows us to use our package JSON to specify what scripts we want to run on the Git hook lifecycles. So I'll come out of here and I'll copy in the install line. So we're adding Husky, but we're also adding this tool called lint-staged. And lint-staged is a wonderful tool that allows us to run certain scripts against all of the files that have been added to the Git stage. So that's any files that we've run git add on and they're currently ready waiting to be committed. So instead of running our linter against all the code in the repository all the time, which doesn't really make sense because most of it hasn't changed, lint-staged allows us to just lint only the files that are currently on the Git stage, and therefore only lint the files that have actually been changed since the last commit. So we'll run this and install those two tools. So now we need to create a config for lint-staged. So we'll create vim lint-staged.config.js, and into here I'll paste in that, and I'll just remove the sidebar so we can see a bit better. And here we're just specify an export object that has a linters key, and then inside that we specify a test glob. So this will test all files in the repository that end in JS, Markdown, TypeScript, CSS, etc., any of those extensions, and then we give it an array to run against all files that are matched. So we're running eslint-fixed, we're running prettier-write, jest, find related tests, and then git add. So this will run against all files that have been git added, and then each file will be run against this test, and if the file matches, we'll run this array of commands. So it will run eslint-fix, so that will lint all the code and then fix the errors. Then we'll run prettier-write, so that will format the code with Prettier and then write the formatted code in place into the file. And then we're running jest to run all the tests, but we're only looking for related tests using the --find related tests flag. And that will tell jest to look for all of the tests that we have in our repository that are related to the files that we found using this glob up here. And then because we've potentially edited these files, we need to re-add them to the Git stage. So then the last command is git add. So with that, we'll take all of the staged files, lint it, format it, run the tests, and then re-add it. And if any of these commands fail for any reason, the most likely of course is the tests, maybe the tests fail, then lint-staged will tell Husky, which is going to be what we're calling lint-staged with, that something failed, and Husky will actually stop us from committing the code. So that anytime a commit actually hits the Git repo, we can be sure that it's correctly formatted and all the tests are passing. So we'll just save this here and we'll exit out. And the last thing for us to do is to set up Husky. And we do that inside our package JSON. So we'll open up the package JSON, and again I'll close the sidebar there, and I'll just come down to the bottom and I'll create another key and I'll call it Husky. And then to that, I'll give it an object, if I could spell Husky correctly. And then our Husky object takes another key called hooks, which is another object. And then in here, all the keys will be the keys that we want to run on certain lifecycle hooks. So we want to run on the pre-commit hook, and then we give that the script that we want to run on that pre-commit hook. And we want to run yarn pre-commit. So this is an npm script called pre-commit that we haven't created yet, but we will do that right now. So we'll come back up to the scripts, and just below here, we'll add a pre-commit, script. And we want to run lint-staged when we run that npm script. So now Husky has set up a pre-commit hook. So then when we try to commit code to the Git repository, Git will call the Husky pre-commit hook, which will trigger the yarn pre-commit script, which will run lint-staged. And then if that passes, the code is committed into the repository, everything's fine. And if anything in lint-staged fails, that'll tell Husky there was a failure, and then that will tell Git that there was a failure, and Git won't allow us to commit the code. So that's how we enforce ESLint and Prettier styling and formatting in our repository all the time. So if anybody ever makes any changes, they have to commit the code, and if they commit the code, they'll trigger the pre-commit hook, which will run our linting and our formatting, and run any tests for us, etc, etc. So with all that done, we have the repository set up for open source best practices. So everything is in place and ready for other people to start committing the code. So now all that's left to do is for us to actually deploy our code to npm so that other people can use it. And we'll use Travis continuous integration so that every time we tag a commit for a new release, Travis will automatically deploy that to npm for us. And Travis also gives us other benefits with open source, like making sure that all the tests are passing for a pull request. Of course, they should be because we have the Git hooks in place, but Travis just allows an impartial third party to run those tests for us to make sure it's all working. But anyway, that is enough rambling for me in this part. I will see you in the next part where we're going to deploy to npm. So if you liked the video, give me a thumbs up, hit the subscribe button, bell notification, all of that YouTube good stuff. If you really like what I'm doing, I have a Patreon, you can check that out. But until next video, stay hungry and keep coding.